They said the sun vanished, that the sky broke open like a rotten tree, that fire poured from the heavens and swallowed gods and men alike. They called it Ragnarök. But what if it wasn't just a myth? What if the Old Norse, centuries before the age of satellites and climate models, saw something real, something terrifying, and passed it down? The only way they knew how: in poetry, in legend, in blood. What if the prophecy of the end wasn't fiction but memory? We like to think of ancient people as simple, superstitious. But the Vikings were anything but fools. They were observers, survivors, watchers of the sea and sky. And they left behind stories that feel far too vivid to be random imagination. Stories of a world-ending winter, of wolves eating the sun, of poison in the air, of fire giants marching over burning bridges, of the gods themselves falling in a war they could not win. You may be tempted to dismiss it all as fantasy. And maybe it is, but what if it's not? Because in the ruins of Northern Europe, in the black soil of Scandinavia, in the frost-bitten sagas written down centuries after they were spoken, there lies something strange, something unsettling, something that doesn't quite behave like fiction. It behaves more like a warning. Now you might ask, why does it matter what a few medieval warriors believed about the end of the world? Why give weight to their ghost stories, their superstitions? But I ask you, why do so many civilizations separated by oceans and language and time remember a great collapse? Why do their stories speak of fire from the sky, darkness at noon, seas rising, and the gods falling silent? Are these all just coincidences? Or is there something beneath the myth, some primal truth we've forgotten? Tonight we go north, beyond the cold fog of reason, beyond the walls of orthodox history. We follow the path of wolves. We enter the twilight of the gods. This is not just about Vikings. This is about us. Because if the story they told was true, if they saw the end and lived just long enough to whisper it into legend, then maybe Ragnarök isn't coming. Maybe it already happened. Or worse, maybe it's happening again. This is the story of the fire that never dies. This is Ragnarök. Long before the word Viking echoed through history books, before their long ships carved paths across the North Sea, there lived a people who understood something we have forgotten: that the world is not permanent, that the ice cracks, that the sky is not always friendly. They lived on the edge of survival. In the fjords of Norway, the wind-swept plains of Denmark, the dense pine forests of Sweden. Winters were long, cruel, and silent. The sun at times barely showed its face, and when it did, it hung low and tired, like an old man who had seen too much. These people whom we call Norse were not merely warriors. They were farmers, shipbuilders, astronomers in their own way. They watched the skies with reverence and fear. They studied the stars as maps, the weather as scripture, and nature as a voice speaking in symbols. They believed the world was held together by a great tree, Yggdrasil, a cosmic pillar linking the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. And they believed that one day, even this tree would tremble. You see, to the Norse, time wasn't a straight line. It was circular. They did not speak of the future as we do. They spoke of cycles, winters and springs, death and rebirth, collapse and renewal. But beneath that worldview lies something darker, a sense that destruction is not a question of if, but when. And so they prepared, not with panic, but with story. The sagas, their sacred oral tradition, were more than just tales to pass the time. They were memory banks, containers of ancestral fear encoded into myth. And within those myths is Ragnarök. But here's what keeps me awake at night. These were people without satellites, No nuclear weapons, no carbon emissions, and yet they described a world-ending winter, a sun that disappears, floods that drown nations, a serpent whose breath poisons the sky. How did they know? Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was fear carved into poetry. But maybe it was something else. A memory passed down. A story older than the Viking Age, older than their gods. Something inherited from a time before writing, before ships, before even the Norse themselves. We know cultures remember trauma in mythic form. Flood myths, for instance, appear on every continent. Why not doomsday myths, too? Why not Ragnarök? What we call myth today may have once been lived experience. So, when the Norse told of the Fimbul winter, 3 years without sun, brother killing brother, the land buried in snow, they weren't just creating a story. They were echoing something their ancestors saw. And they wrapped it in wolves, giants, and gods, because that was the only language they had. Our mistake is to ignore the symbols, to read the surface and miss the depth, to dismiss the myth and forget the warning. The Norse didn't invent the end of the world. They remembered it, and if they remembered it, who did they hear it from? What storm did they survive? And how close are we now to hearing those old echoes again? This is how the world ends, not with a sudden flash, but with a cold whisper. First comes the Fimbul winter, not one season, not two, but 3 whole winters, back to back. No spring, no summer, just relentless cold. The sun refuses to rise. Snow covers the fields. The rivers freeze. Crops wither. Hunger sets in. And then, the worst part, mankind turns on itself. Fathers kill sons. Brothers slaughter brothers. The bonds of kinship rot under the weight of survival. No law, no honor, no memory of the gods. Only blood. And then, as if the world itself could take no more, the skies begin to bleed. The great wolf skull chases the sun and finally catches it, swallows it whole. Darkness reigns. His brother Hiti devours the moon. The stars fall from the heavens like dying embers. The earth shakes. Mountains split. The great world tree Yggdrasil groans, its roots cracking in pain. And beneath the land, in the realm of shadows, Loki is freed from his chains. He marches toward the final battlefield. And with him come the dead. Sailed in from Helheim aboard a ship made of fingernails and bones. From the south, the fire giants rise, led by Surtur with a sword brighter than the sun. They cross the Rainbow Bridge, and Bifrost shatters beneath their weight. From the depths, Jörmungandr awakens the Midgard serpent. So massive he encircles the world. He rears his head, spits poison into the sky, and sets the seas to boiling. And then, as silence falls, the gods rise to meet their doom. Odin, the All-Father, rides into battle knowing he will not return. He faces Fenrir, the great wolf, and is swallowed whole. Thor meets Jörmungandr. He slays the serpent, but takes 9 steps before falling dead, his lungs full of venom. Freyr, god of fertility, confronts Surtur, but he is unarmed, his sword long given away. He dies in flame. One by one, the gods fall. Not in triumph, but in inevitability. This is not a battle they expect to win. It is an ending they always knew was written. And then Surtur raises his blade, and the world burns. The oceans rise. The earth is swallowed by water. Flame meets ice. Smoke swallows all sound. And just when you think it's over, a new beginning. From the blackened soil, the earth is reborn. Green again. Cleansed. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, emerge from the forest. They survive by hiding in the trunk of Yggdrasil. They begin again. And the sun is reborn. A daughter of the one devoured. Brighter. Warmer. New. This is Ragnarök, an end, a rebirth, a story so terrifying, and yet so full of strange hope. But here's the question that's haunted me since I first heard it. Why would a people invent this? Why craft a prophecy so detailed, so cruel, so full of blood and frost and sorrow? Unless they were trying to remember something, unless they had seen a version of this before. Myth, you see, is often just memory in disguise. And this memory feels far too vivid to be fiction. We like to believe the past is quiet, that the earth beneath our feet is just dirt, just history. But sometimes it speaks. In 2010, researchers studying ice cores from Greenland found something strange: a sulfur spike, a chemical fingerprint of an enormous volcanic eruption, dated to the year 536 AD. That same year, Byzantine historian Procopius wrote of a sun that gave forth its light without brightness like the moon. Across the world, in China, Ireland, and Mesopotamia, records echo the same horror: a sky that darkened, a chill that gripped the land, and harvests that failed. Crops withered, people starved, empires cracked. Modern scientists now believe that a massive volcanic eruption, perhaps in Iceland or the tropics, cast so much ash into the sky that it dimmed the sun for over a year. It became known as the worst year to be alive. And here's the thing: this happened nearly 3 centuries before the Viking Age even began. Yet in the Norse imagination there lingers this idea of a sun swallowed by shadow, of long winters without end, of a world buckling under ice and fear. Coincidence? Or was the memory of this catastrophe preserved in fragments, passed down through stories and sagas until it became myth? Dig a little deeper, and the soil tells more secrets. At Uppåkra, in southern Sweden, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a great hall, burned down, rebuilt, burned again. Not by accident, not by enemies, by ritual, deliberate destruction. Fire used not as weapon, but as symbol. Why would a community repeatedly burn its sacred spaces? Some believe it was part of a cycle, a ceremony echoing death and rebirth. Others whisper darker possibilities, that it commemorated a cataclysm, a cultural scar so deep it had to be reenacted to be remembered. In Norway's Hoga burial mounds, charred remains lie next to iron weapons, not destroyed in battle, but arranged. It's as if they were trying to say something, or perhaps preserve something. And in places like Oseberg and Gokstad, famous Viking ship burials, we see another clue: symbolic funerals. Whole ships buried under the earth, laden with treasures. Servants, animals sent off into the next world. Why bury ships unless you feared a flood? Why send the dead into boats unless you remembered the waters rising? And all of it, layered in ash and soil. When we think of myth, we imagine parchment. But true myth is written in stone and bone. And the Norse left us both. You see, archaeology is not about what we find. It's about what we can't explain. Because under every burned hall, under every scorched field, lies a question we don't know how to answer. Why did so many Norse myths center around destruction? Why such obsession with winter darkness and fire? Unless they had lived through something that felt like the end of the world. And if they did, what else might they have buried beneath the ice? In the old Norse myths, there were wolves in the sky. Not just any wolves, cosmic predators. Skull, who chased the sun. Hoti, who pursued the moon. And when they caught them, darkness would fall. The stars would vanish. And Ragnarök would begin. Poetic, yes. But what if there was something behind the poetry? Something real, something astronomical. Let me take you to the year 774. No Viking records, no sagas. But the trees remember. All across the globe from Germany to Japan, tree rings show a sudden sharp spike in carbon-14, a signature of a massive radiation event. Modern scientists now believe it may have been caused by an enormous solar flare, what we call a cosmic ray event, a solar storm large enough to bombard the Earth with high-energy particles, strong enough perhaps to scorch the sky, to trigger auroras seen at the equator, to confuse the heavens themselves. The sun, they say, might have appeared to flicker, or even vanish temporarily behind a haze of magnetic disruption. And to ancient eyes, eyes without telescopes or theory, what would that have looked like? A wolf, devouring the sun. Even in our modern era, we are not immune. In 1859, a solar flare known now as the Carrington event struck the Earth. Telegraph systems sparked, lines burned, auroras danced over the skies of Cuba and Hawaii. If something like that happened today, it could knock out satellites' GPS power grids. Within hours, modern civilization would begin to stall. Within days, collapse. And yet, the Norse already feared it. They envisioned the heavens as a battlefield, where creatures of shadow hunted the lights we depend on. We used to think they were just making it up. But now, we wonder, could they have seen something? Could some ancient solar storm have terrified the skies of Scandinavia, turned daylight into twilight, and been remembered not as science, but as story? And there's more. Norse myths describe Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, as breaking under the weight of fire giants. A rainbow broken. Could that be their metaphor for an aurora, for solar activity so intense it fractured their sense of order? Remember, to them, the sky wasn't a void. It was a stage, and every light had meaning. To lose the sun, to see the heavens ripple and writhe, wouldn't just be terrifying. It would mean the gods were dying. Maybe we haven't outgrown their fears. We've just renamed them. Today we speak of electromagnetic pulses, grid failure, data loss. But beneath all our science lurks the same old dread, that something from above, something ancient and untamable, could come roaring back. And when it does, who will stop the wolves? Let's step back, take a breath, put away the flames and wolves, the poisoned skies, and shattered suns. Let's ask the question every historian is trained to ask: what if none of it is real? Most scholars, reasonable, careful minds, see Ragnarök as metaphor, not prophecy, not memory, but poetry. And perhaps they're right. They remind us that myth is not meant to be literal. It's symbolic, a reflection of human experience. Our fears, our hopes, our attempts to make sense of a world that often defies sense. The Norse, after all, lived in a harsh landscape. Winters were brutal. Life was short. Famine, war, disease, they weren't distant threats. They were constants. So what did they do? They told stories. Stories that gave shape to chaos, that made suffering noble, that turned death into a necessary passage, not a meaningless end. Ragnarök, in this view, is not about the end of the world. It's about the end of illusion, the death of false gods of old orders, a necessary clearing of the field before new life can emerge. It's a myth of cycles, of death and rebirth, a natural rhythm, one mirrored in agriculture, in seasons, in the stars themselves. And it's not unique. The Hindus speak of Kali Yuga, the dark age before renewal. The Aztecs believed in 5 suns, 5 worlds, each destroyed and remade. Christianity tells of Revelation apocalypse, followed by a new heaven and earth. So maybe the Norse weren't remembering anything. Maybe they were just feeling what we've always felt, that the world is fragile, that nothing lasts, that endings come before beginnings. It's easy to be seduced by the drama of Ragnarök, but scholars remind us, don't confuse poetry with prophecy. Don't read myth like a map. These were stories told by firelight, by people trying to find meaning in long winters and sudden death, trying to explain why crops failed or loved ones vanished in storms. And so they created wolves in the sky, serpents beneath the sea, giants made of flame, gods who, despite their power, could not escape fate. Because that's the heart of it. Even the gods must die. It's a strangely democratic idea, isn't it? The gods are not immortal in the Norse imagination. They're not all-powerful. They are noble, wise, flawed, and doomed. And that is profoundly human. Perhaps more than any other myth, Ragnarök reminds us that even the divine must fall, that even the stars must go dark. But it also whispers something else, that after the fire comes the forest, after death, rebirth. So the Orthodox view is cautious, not dismissive, just careful. It respects the myth without claiming it happened. It honors the wisdom without searching for cosmic evidence. In this view, Ragnarök isn't a memory, it's a mirror, held up to the soul of a people, and to us. Because when we stare into that myth, when we watch the gods fall and the world burn, what we're really seeing is ourselves. Let's entertain another possibility. Not the safe one, not the scholarly one, but the shadowed one. The one that hums beneath your skin at night when the wind sounds too much like a voice. What if Ragnarök was real? Not real in the sense of fire giants and world serpents, but real as a memory, a record of something seen, something survived, and something so terrible it had to be buried in myth to be bearable at all. Some researchers fringe to some visionary, to others propose this, that ancient myths are not inventions but containers, vessels holding fragments of past cataclysms, encoded, encrypted, and passed down in rhyme and symbol. Let's go back further, far beyond the Viking Age, back to the younger Dryas, around 12 and 800 years ago. Something happened then. The Earth's temperature plunged. Mass extinction swept across the globe. Megafauna vanished, and entire cultures disappeared into silence. Some say it was a comet, a cosmic impact that triggered firestorms, floods, atmospheric collapse. Others speak of solar disruptions, pole shifts, even ancient civilizations lost beneath rising seas. What matters is this. Whatever happened, it left a scar on human memory. And scar tissue in the ancient world becomes myth. Across the globe, cultures tell eerily similar stories. In Mesopotamia, a flood sent by angry gods. In Mesoamerica, suns destroyed one after the next. In India, battles of fire and sky. And in the north, a long winter. A dying sun, poisoned skies, a serpent awakening from the deep. Does it sound so different? Is Ragnarök merely Norse, or part of something older, something planetary? Some believe the Norse inherited a trauma one remembered dimly past, orally, and reshaped to fit their landscape. They changed the faces, added their gods. But the bones of the story may be ancient. And then there are the fire rituals, the buried ships, the burned halls rebuilt again and again. Echoes of something cyclical, not just destruction, but deliberate remembrance. Like survivors who know they must pass on the warning, but fear that only story will last longer than stone. What if the Norse weren't imagining the end, but transmitting it? A record from the deep past, wrapped in poetry to outlive time itself. We often laugh at ancient myth. We treat it like bedtime stories, childlike fears. But maybe they were the wiser ones, because they didn't forget. They remembered the stars falling. They remembered the ash and ice. They remembered the fire that came from the sky and the cold that lasted years. And so they told us in the only language we were still capable of hearing. Myth, not fiction. not metaphor, but warning. And if they remembered the last ending, what does that say about what we've forgotten? We like to think we've moved beyond myth, that our machines, our science, our data have made us immune to ancient fears. But look around. The wolves have changed their names. We don't call them Skjold and Hati anymore. We call them climate collapse, nuclear escalation, artificial intelligence with no conscience, biosphere destabilization, 1,000 silent threats, each one stalking the sun. And the winter, it's not snow that buries us, it's disconnection. A winter of meaning, a world wired together, yet numb, scroll by scroll, crisis by crisis, until we stop seeing the pattern, until the myth starts happening and no one notices. The Norse watched the sky, they listened to wind, they read the cracks in ice like scripture, and they saw a story not just about gods or monsters, but about themselves. They told of a world that would end, not suddenly, but slowly, through neglect, through betrayal, through the forgetting of sacred order. Tell me that doesn't sound familiar. We are Odin now, blind in one eye, searching endlessly for wisdom, but still choosing to ride into doom. We are Thor strong, angry, swinging hammers at shadows, while poison seeps into our lungs. We are Loki, clever, cynical, amused by the chaos, until it comes for us too. And somewhere, we are the two survivors. Leif and Lifthrasir, hidden in the forest, waiting for the fire to burn itself out, hoping maybe that something better can be rebuilt. Maybe the Vikings weren't prophesying the end of their world. Maybe they were prophesying the end of ours. Not because they could see the future, but because they remembered what we forgot. That civilization is fragile, that pride is blinding, that nature is patient, but not forgiving, and that nothing, not even the gods, lasts forever. But Ragnarök wasn't just about destruction. That's the part we miss. Yes, the gods die. Yes, the world burns. Yes, the sky goes dark. But then, life returns. A green earth rises from the sea. The sun is reborn brighter than before. Two human beings step out of the darkness and begin again. It's not just apocalypse. It's memory and mercy. Maybe that's the real message. Not doom, but humility. And the faith that even after our worst mistakes, something human might survive, if we're wise enough to listen, if we're brave enough to remember. So here we are, at the edge of the story, at the end of the world again. But this time, it's not myth. It's not a tale told in a longhouse beneath smoke-dark rafters. It's not sung by skalds or whispered in the frost. It's us. Now. Today. We've built a world of steel and glass circuits and servers. We speak in code. We fly without wings. We've touched the stars. And yet, we are no safer than the Vikings were, just more distracted. They feared the gods would die. We fear meaning will. They watch the skies for omens. We stare at screens for updates. They carve their warnings into stone. We bury ours in algorithms. But the storm still comes. The wolf still waits. Call it war. Call it collapse. Call it something quieter. The slow erosion of wonder. The death of empathy. Whatever name we give it, the end they saw is not far from the one we sense. And yet, still, there is that forest, that one green place rising after the ash. In the old story, two humans survive, Leif and Lifthrasir. They do not fight, they do not flee. They wait. They endure in silence beneath the bark of Yggdrasil. And when the sun returns, they step out, barefoot, unarmed, alive. It's not a triumphant ending. It's not a Hollywood finale. It's a beginning. Quiet, humble, sacred. And maybe that's what the Norse were really trying to tell us. Not that the world must end, but that it will. Again and again. In fire, in frost, in forgetting. But also that something always survives. Something green. Something human. If we are willing to carry the memory. So I leave you now with no answer, only a question. What if Ragnarök wasn't just a story? What if it was a message not from the gods, but from ourselves long ago? When we still listened to the earth, when we still feared the sky, when we still remembered what it meant to begin again. And if that message was true, then I ask you, are we living in the end? Or are we already walking toward the forest?